Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Tab Sleep Glover, and today we're going to be covering how to design an abstract painting with the design techniques that we teach on the site and then on this YouTube channel. So stick around. This is going to be probably like a 3-part series, and we're going to go through all the details, all the composition techniques, and show you how you can create unity, movement, rhythm, all that stuff within just some random marks onto your canvas or a drawing. And the first part is we're going to start with a drawing. And these are just thumbnails that I did using the technique I'm going to show you, but you can see they're all just really abstract. This is basically, I call it ocean of flowers, and it's just an ocean with colorful dots and circles in the sky. So I'll show you some previous paintings that I did on the screen, and you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. But this goes for any abstract paintings. You can organize shapes just the same way you can organize figures. You can organize any shapes within the scene of your photo to create more rhythm and all of that good stuff. So let me show you this too. This is what we're gonna strive for today. This is all the design techniques in a thumbnail. I'm gonna do a larger thumbnail so you can see it easier, but that's kind of what we're gonna do. This is how I start out the thumbnails, and then they end up like this. And it's just inspiration. I could use it as a reference for a painting, but it's just to work out ideas and things like that. And if I have certain colors in mind, I'll try and focus on, like, say this is all red, and then I'll focus on certain values to represent white and things like that. So let's get started. So I wrote down all the design techniques we're going to cover just for easy reference for you guys. And the balance is down here. It's a little cut off in the screen, but balance is very important. I put FGR at the top, even though that doesn't come into play until you render, but you should have the foreground and background in mind with what your subject is. It's abstract, so basically we'll have a certain amount of color for the main subject or certain shapes for the main subject. But if you're doing like a figure, you want to make sure your background and foreground are clearly separated. So that's why figuring out relationship is the #1 technique I put up there. Dynamic symmetry, major diagonals. These are promoted by the dynamic symmetry. Triangular enclosures are as well, 90-degree angles. We'll do arabesques, ellipses, gamut. The greatest area of contrast, that's kind of where we're drawing the viewer's eyes. And then we can also do that with colors. Pattern, we want to incorporate some patterns in there. And then vignette, keep the eyes within the composition and not high contrast near the edge. Negative space, we're going to try and fill in some negative space if it's not looking balanced. So let's get started. Just going to do a random thumbnail. Doesn't have to be anything special. Show you the tools I'm using here. And if you look at, I'll link another video, and it's going to have a list. I did a drawing course, but it's going to have a list of all the materials I used in the drawing course, which is pretty much all of these right here. So I've got a couple of erasers. I've got the kneaded eraser, and then this is B-lead. So it's going to be a little darker. That's going to help us create the GAC. This is HB. It's a medium kind of darkness. And then this is a light darkness. This is 2H. And then this is a B-lead, but it's a fine point B-lead. So we'll see if we use those. And we're going to be using our fingers to smudge around a little bit, create some values. Oh yeah, and I forgot one important technique that I like to incorporate. It's aerial perspective. And that's how we can create depth within the scene. Even though it's abstract shapes, you can still create depths with edges. Soft, hard, contrast, it recedes, comes forward. So let's draw this simple little rectangle. And the canvases I'm using, they're 9 by 12. That's a 4/3 rectangle, but for your thumbnails, it doesn't matter. I usually make them about a 1.5 rectangle. But if you're using it for a reference, you probably want to make it the rectangle not the same size as your canvas, because we're going to be, in the later parts, we're going to be drawing the grid right on the canvas. It doesn't have to be straight. You can make it straight if you want. Rough sketch on there. This is all rough. This is going to be loose. It's going to be fun. So we've got the rectangle. Now we're going to do dynamic symmetry. And how we do that is just make sure you draw these real rough, these diagonals corner to corner. And if you mess up, just sketch it in. It doesn't matter. And then the next one, these are the reciprocals. These are going to intersect the major diagonals at 90 degrees. So you can do this all freehand. Just imagine a T. If you can make a T, okay, with this major diagonal from the corner here. See the T there? So just draw a line. I usually use that as a reference. I lay down my pencil like that, and then I draw the line. So we've got it there. And we're just making it real loose and light. because we're going to erase these later. So now we're going to do another one. And now, since we've got this diagonal going, we're just going to parallel it and meet this corner. Okay, parallel, meet that corner, come across, and it's automatically making a T. Okay, it's all loose. Scribble, doesn't matter. Okay, now we're going to go from this corner across this diagonal and make a T. So that looks kind of like a T. So we're going to go across here. Nice and easy. Parallel it to this diagonal here. Make another T. You see the T here? So now we've got our rough grid. We're not going to use the horizontals or verticals. Okay, now we've got the major diagonals already, and we can incorporate that into our design if we want. We're just going to see how stuff evolves. First I want to, since this is going to be an ocean scene with the sky full of flowers, so I'm going to draw the approximate ocean where I want it to be, and try and avoid thirds because that's super basic and beginner looking. So I'm going to go, I like more sky than the ocean, but I don't want too little of ocean. Like, I don't want it down here, so I want just enough ocean to represent some waves and add some more colors. So right there looks pretty good. You can also do it, if you like the ocean more, you can do it way up here and just add a little bit of sky, but I like it down here better. So triangular enclosure, we're going to do that next, and that's basically just a triangle within your composition. We can already see there's tons of them created by the dynamic symmetry grid. We could use those if we want. I usually like to create one that's not exactly from the grid. So maybe, let's see, I want to go find this center, and then we're going to go parallel. Let's parallel this diagonal, and then we'll parallel this diagonal. Parallel, it's obvious it's just going in the same direction, like this. I'm going to bring it up, draw across. You can make it go across the center, but I'm just focusing on this triangle here. And you can create another one. Let's do one kind of like this one. It's already kind of in the grid, so let's go with that. And we'll do another one. So there's two triangles. You can do 1, 2, 3, it doesn't matter. Just try and keep track of them all. And then I'll do one more. Maybe we'll try one down here. There. So there's another one. 3 triangles. Okay. Now let's draw an ellipse. Or actually, let's go to the 90-degree angles first. And that's pretty easy. You just look at the grid, see what other lines you already have. The triangle, we've got that. So let's go. This one's already creating a 90-degree right here, so we've already got one. That's why the grid promotes these design techniques. Make sure they're tilted as well. See how it's tilted? You don't want it straight up and down like a telephone pole. You want it tilted. So if you got one, and should have another one, this right here, this and this, these are 90-degree angles. We'll create one more that's not on the grid. So we've got 1, 2, oh, this 1, 2. We'll do one more that leads us up maybe from this area to here. So I'm trying to think of, I want to add interest in these areas that don't have like the triangles in them, things like that, create movement. But I want to keep my edges free of high contrast, so always remember that. So there's 1, 2, 3 90-degree angles. Pretty easy. Sloppy, easy, perfect. This is all supposed to be rough. Okay, now this is the fun part. We get to do arabesque, and the arabesque is kind of like a glue that goes throughout the composition and unites everything together. So right now we've got nice angles and things like that, but let's add some elegant movement. So we're going to start with the triangle first. And the way you do it is just find a line and try and think of how you're going to curve it to the next line. And we've got this triangle here, remember? So I'm going to start with that, and then I'm going to curve it around here, and I'll probably go up to that 90-degree angle. So we can go like this. Notice I'm using the side of the pencil. It's just a little easier. You want to keep it light. You don't want to gouge into your drawing, but however works best for you. This works best for me, so I'm just going to like lightly curve it up to this 90-degree angle. Here's another 90-degree angle, so I'm going to try and curve it around that. And where else are we going to go? We could go down this 90-degree angle and hit the top of this triangle. So we'll do that. Okay, now I want to swing lower. Let's see where we can go. We can go down here. We can go down this. This is the reciprocal, remember, coming from that corner and intersecting at 90 degrees. So we're going to take this arabesque and we're going to swing it down, and we'll be hitting this edge of the triangle here. This is the triangle. So we're going to swing it down, hit that. We're going to curve it around the bottom of that triangle and see where else we can go. Now, we can go up here, hit the edge of this triangle in the middle. So we'll do that. And then I will curve around this reciprocal here, which is also the 90-degree. And then I'm going to run up. We have this triangle here. I want to unite that. So we're going to run up. Let's just create. Also, we got to remember we want to unite this ocean with the rest of the design up here. So what I'm going to do is curve down into the ocean area, kind of like I did here, and to make it curve onto this reciprocal diagonal. That way it can run up to this triangle. So now we're already there, we're already at the triangle, and now we can curve back around, connect this edge, and then we want to complete the loop if we can. Don't have to, but let's see. Yeah, so if we go here around this edge of the triangle, we can loop back down here. So now we got a whole circuit of movement throughout that whole composition. And your brain might be scrambled right now, like there's a lot of lines, but now, I mean, once we finish this, all you have to do is align things to the lines, and you can try and keep track of your triangles, because that's one of the main things we'll fill in first with color. I like to keep track of the triangles, and then make sure you keep track of the arabesques. Now the ellipse, we've already got plenty of ellipses created by that arabesque, so we could complete those if we want. I usually just, if they're already creating that elliptical shape, I usually just leave them be or fill them in. So this ellipse right here, a bigger one. Okay, so we've got the ellipses done. Now we're going to do gamut. That's repeating diagonals. We've already got plenty of repeating diagonals that are promoted from the grid, but we're going to add maybe 2 more. And we're going to find probably just a triangle and repeat a diagonal of the triangle. So here's one. So I like this edge, so we're just going to draw a line maybe that coincides. A coincidence, that's another technique I forgot to write up there, but it is all promoted by the grid. Coincidence is basically, say this is the top of this triangle here, this is the triangle. So coincidence is if I draw this line and it coincides with the top of that triangle. So that's what I'm going to do. So as you're drawing the gamut, you can try and create a coincidence as well. So right there, that's a repeating diagonal right here, and then we're coinciding with this top of the triangle. So if we're putting effort in to making these design techniques and that's a specific coincidence, we want to make sure we add a little contrast there and a contrast here, so we keep that coincidence as we render, which is the next step. So gamut, and then we've got GAC, that's part of the rendering process. Pattern is also part of the rendering process. Vignette is as well. So we're looking at negative space right now. We've got a nice amount of negative space, allowing the composition to breathe. It's not a lot of negative space. You can have a lot of negative space if you're wanting to create like more like a grand scale or isolation, loneliness, that type of feeling, like quietness, where you're capturing more of the environment. You can do that. And then we've also got nice balance. Not everything's on the left, not everything's on the right. It's all kind of just balanced. All right, so we've covered all the techniques except for the rendering ones, and that's what we're going to do next. So let's start rendering it, and then we'll eventually fill in all the areas with what we want, and then we'll erase these construction lines, and then we'll be left with the design. So sometimes I just like to darken this frame a little bit better. So I'm just going to take this is the B pencil, nice firm line, give us our rectangle. Now let's just start filling in. We want to keep track of the triangles, so let's try and figure out where we want the viewer's eyes to go first. And if you know, if you've seen some videos, if you remember on the site, you know that most viewers read from left to right, just like they're reading a book, and they read from top to bottom. So typically if you add contrast in this upper left area and you coincide it with like a diagonal, you can get more movement sometimes because of the way the viewer's eyes read from left to right. If you added your high contrast down here, you're going to have to balance it with contrast up here so it keeps the eyes moving around. It's all about balance of contrast, but if you have too much in one corner or one area and you're not creating design techniques to allow the eyes to move around, then you're going to be in trouble. And your viewer's eyes are going to be trapped in a certain location. So we're going to probably just let's have their eyes kind of come into this area. We've got two triangles plus this triangle, so we're gonna do like maybe, let's create a little contrast here, and I'm gonna make sure I keep track of these, and it's gonna be scribbles, all abstract stuff. I'm gonna do, this is a 90, so I'm gonna go with filling in this area with value. That keeps intact this edge of the triangle, as well as the major diagonal and the 90-degree angle. And you want to make it not so obvious, like that's an obvious area that's from something geometric. So you want to just make it a little sloppy, scribble. And you'll have your own style. This is just my style. And you want to keep a little bit of the movement up here from that ellipse, so I'm blending it out and making it not look so obvious. So I'm scribbling it inside here, and then down here on the tip of the triangle, the bottom tip. Bottom tip, is that a word? I don't know. So this is all creating value, and we're going to draw the viewer's eyes in this area first. And I know what you're thinking, it looks stupid and sloppy. Perhaps that's what you're thinking, I don't know. But to me, this is just as good as designing with, figures. You're using the same exact techniques. So this is what I meant by aerial perspective. When you rub it, see how it's fading the contrast there? It's creating like a foggy effect. You can do that with paints, and we'll do that later as we paint, but with your finger you can just rub it on. It doesn't matter if you have oils on your fingers. If you're worried about that, you can use other things like rags, but this is just a simple rough sketch, so it doesn't bother me. So we've got this gradient of values, kind of a medium gradient, and then it fades out. So now I want to put my contrast right in there, and then maybe create a little pattern, some dots around it. Okay. And we'll keep working around, creating value. We're just trying to keep track of the major points of this design, and then making it not so obvious. That way we keep our design but still have something abstract. So and I like to work with a lot of like circles, like flowers, like abstract flowers, And we'll just keep working around. See, this is starting to look a little straight, so I'll add a few dots up here to throw it off. I don't want it to look too obvious. Okay, and then I want to focus on this triangle now. This triangle, the big one. I'm just completing this triangle, so we've got a nice visual of that triangle. We'll just keep working around to the triangles until we finish those, and then we'll go to the other ones. So this one, let's see, we got an arabesque going through there. So the way we can keep track of this triangle is we can fill in this area with value, and that'll keep track of some ellipses, arabesques, and the diagonal of the triangle. I'm going to add some, this was the point, so I'm going to add a little point there and then just blend it out. And once we finish all adding everything, we'll take a nice overall look and make sure all the contrast is in the right place, nothing's out of balance and things like that. So let's go over here. I've got that corner taken care of. Let's go over here. Let's do this one. Now we've got this arabesque coming down here. We've got, let's see, this is the 90-degree angle, so this whole area here, this is the top of the triangle, so this whole area here can be shaded in. Could be a nice little part of our design. And then we can probably, let's shade this area in here. It's part of the ellipse and the arabesque. And then we'll circle it around here to that diagonal and the coincidence. And blend it in, create some nice depth. Okay. Some contrast in there. So it's not as high contrast here. This isn't as high contrast as actual the darkest mark, this B pencil on white paper. So we're adding contrast, but it's not as harsh as right here. So right now I got a little hot spot right here, so I got to blend that out or erase it. I'll erase it for now. Alright, let's keep moving around this triangle, make sure we've got certain shadows, edges, things like that coming around. You want variation in your draftsmanship, so that includes different size pencils, in reference to drawing. So it includes different size pencils, smudging, rubbing out, that's called pentimenti, where you make a line and you rub it out. All this is covered in that drawing course. Stylistic marks rather than just laying in value. So smudging with fingers, blending stumps, Q-tips, cloth, that's all used moderately by artists that know how to control the value of their pencils. But some of those tools are used to create expressive marks. There are a few examples in the PDF files, and you can refer to those whenever you want to get inspiration for your drawings. But an interesting one is called pentimenti. I believe that's how you pronounce it. But if you look at enough master drawings, you'll start to see something that looks like the line was rubbed out, and it creates a sense of movement within the drawing. And you should watch those videos. I got a lot of the videos for free on there, but watch that if you can. Otherwise, just try and enjoy this. So we're filling this in, and we've got a nice arabesque incorporating this 90-degree angle plus the top of this triangle here. So we're going to just fill in some value there. And we can make some patterns here. Okay. It really comes together once you erase the construction lines. It looks pretty cool. So now let's go. We've got this triangle pretty laid in pretty well. Now let's go to this triangle. Just making some dots. Gonna make some more circles, so we'll do, I'm not gonna do any circles in the water. This is the water here. But we can add value with, when we're painting, we can add value here to complement that design. Like over here. I have an article on, I have probably just at least a few articles on abstract art, and typically like the Cy Twombly and Jackson Pollock, kind of against that, because I think you have to have structure as you create art, and you pull from your intuition or your gut or whatever you want to call it. You need to have quality knowledge to pull from. You're not born with this talent. So the Cy Twombly type of stuff, just to me, it's lacking the structure. So I'm just filling this in with a rough value. We can do our vignettes real quick. Just a little bit of, like when you're painting, I like to have maybe a darker underlayer of purple maybe, or green, and then a lighter layer on top, but I'll show you all that stuff when we paint. I'm just gonna rub this in nice and sloppy. Yeah. Okay. You can even add little character to these areas, like if you have it grayed in, you can just erase some of it out and then rub it in again. That kind of stuff. Add a little character to it. Alright, so let's finish this triangle. I've already got the value in the ocean. We're going to add a little bit more. And this is going to get filled in with a deeper value here once we're finished, but we're just doing the design right now. Keep track of those techniques. Let's finish this triangle. So we're going to go, this is a major diagonal, so keep that intact by just adding some squiggle marks and contrast along that line. And I'm going to make a circle here, maybe just a dark circle, and then smudge it out so it's less contrast. Then we probably do like a circle here. Just filling in with dots. Alright, that looks good. We're keeping track of that. Let me, this is part of that coincidence, so let's do some squiggles, and then I'll do a coincidence here, but I'm going to make it up top. So I'll erase that lower one. I'll add a little contrast there. Alright, so we took care of this triangle, that triangle, this triangle, that coincidence, this gamut, this repeating diagonal. We can do this ellipse. Let's see. Let's finish this arabesque since it's already started. It's coming down here. And then it circles up here. Just erasing stuff just to make it look a little more sloppy instead of consistent. I did an article on Berthe Morisset, and one of her techniques was she has a perfect line, but she has this deconstructionism type of thing to her, and she deconstructs perfect lines, makes it look pretty nice and adds more expression to it. So kind of like that idea. So we're doing this ellipse and the arabesque. So we've got that major diagonal, so we're going to keep that intact. You don't have to, but I like to for this example. And let's add contrast with a curve. You want to be subtle about these curves. You don't want them too obvious. Same with any of these techniques. Like this one up here, curves around there. Can be subtle, not too obvious, just to keep that design technique intact. And then we can fine-tune everything once we're erasing all the lines. But so this, and then this up here, probably add a little circle. Some more patterns. Let's do some patterns in the center here. Okay, and then this we'll add some more. Let's see. So this is kind of like edging on that reciprocal here, this diagonal. and then that ellipse, so I'm going to add another circle here. And then we need more up here on this ellipse, so let's go circle here. Let's do another smaller circle. This is just texture. Texture is a really important part too, which is probably, I should add that to the list as well. Texture is a major part of the final painting, and it adds tons of interest to drawings and paintings. Alright, so my camera cut out, but you missed just a few things right here. I created some interest in this area, and I used a coincidence. This circle, the top of the circle, I just drew a line across and then added some interest to the top of that line here. Okay, and then we're ready to erase the construction lines, so let's see what we get. I'm just going to use this bigger eraser. On the smaller thumbnails I use the small eraser, but this one should be good. Just going to erase these, and we'll finesse it how we want. You can erase a lot or a little, but you want to make sure these construction lines or this design is implied and not obvious. That's the whole point of these design techniques. You want to create movement, unity, strength, all that stuff without showing the viewer your magic trick. So I'm just erasing any obvious lines, and then we'll finesse it from there. See if we need to fill in certain areas or erase some more. And then these areas in the ocean, I'll just fill that back in with value. Pretty easy to do, right? So I'm just scratching in some eraser marks, adding some expression in there, some interest. Add some vignette back in there. So if you can't do this stuff with simple shapes and dots and squiggles, then it's going to be really difficult to do it within a photo or a painting. You gotta start out simple. Even if this is too complex for you, just start with just aligning certain dots on a triangle or an ellipse. Go from there. But if you do it step by step, just as I'm showing in this video, you should be fine. I'm adding a little more interest there to keep that 90-degree angle intact. This whole area is a little too obvious, so I got to make sure I break that up. And I'm going to fade this a little bit so it's not high contrast compared to that. I want this to stand out more than this area. Just little adjustments with contrast. You get the hang of it. It's all balanced. Usually when I'm painting, I'll balance it from left to right. So if I'm adding blue here, I'll try and add blue somewhere over here. Same with red or whatever. Just try and keep the color balanced, but also in a hierarchy. And looking forward to sharing that with you guys. This is all obvious here. Just gonna get rid of that. This is obvious. So I'm erasing it while keeping just hints of that design technique. So this C right here is obvious, so I gotta make sure I break that up a little bit. This coincidence here, this gamut, it's all obvious. Make sure I delete some of that, erase some of that. I'm showing you guys my magic trick. Don't tell anybody. Erase more of this, kind of obvious. This whole line is kind of obvious right now, so I want to break that up. And keep in mind, when you're designing these techniques, even the softest shadow can be part of the design. So like right here, if I wanted to keep the edge of that triangle intact, I can just create some really soft value and it keeps that edge intact. Okay, it doesn't have to be hard lines, it can be soft. This looks pretty obvious here, this whole line here, so I want to break that up just a little bit. So like maybe just right here I'll break apart some of that value, add some texture in that area. This is obvious here, break apart that. This is breaking it apart. Deconstructionism, I guess you can call it. So right here I'm just Not getting rid of it completely, I'm just lightening it up a little bit. You can do that with the kneaded eraser too. Just dab it out a little. This is obvious here. And if this is painting, this is basically what I'm doing. I draw the design in with the edge of my brush into a thin layer of paint, and then I paint over the lines when I'm ready to. That's basically what we're doing here. We're erasing the construction lines. And you can blur your eyes, squint a little bit, make sure nothing's too obvious. I'm going to fill in this water so it gives us a better idea of the value we've got going on. And part of the aerial perspective is I'm going to fade this value up into nothingness. So we're going to start dark and then it fades up into like a foggy horizon. I've seen a lot of artists, really talented artists, doing ocean landscapes, painting it, but they'll put a piece of tape all the way across and then paint exactly the horizon super straight, and it kills any chance of adding depth. Like if you're actually looking at the ocean, there's not a straight line like that because there's mist in the air or whatever. The ocean's making waves and splashing mist up in the air. It's an opportunity to add more depth, which is what we're doing here. So don't use tape to create your horizon lines if you're wanting to add depth. So we're adding pressing down harder, adding more value in certain areas. You want to create a texture here. And it looks a lot better with paint. Okay, got the value in pretty much. Faded it up to create depth. Then now we can erase. We'll take the smaller one, create little marks in there, add some interest and texture. And then we're going to add a little more depth with some, maybe you can get the B pencil, and on the bottom of the eraser mark you can add more value. It creates a little more depth. Real fast, real rough, doesn't matter. This is all developing your muscle memory. All of those techniques going to enable you to create them much faster and easier and make it less frustrating to try and incorporate structure into your compositions. Let me fix the vignette. That's probably a little too dark, the vignette, so I'll lighten that up as well. Just dab out some value, add some texture. I've seen also photographers, they create vignettes in their photos and then they just choke the life out of their photos with their super dark vignette. So you don't want to do that. Like a 10% vignette, just real subtle. Alright, let's see what we got here. We're getting there. It's a little obvious in certain spots. Let's see, this area is really obvious. So if you got a circle like this, so you can see that clearly it's a circle, you want to mislead them, like throw them off a little bit, add some more value here, and it starts to blend it in. Right here is circling up, so you add some contrast here. You don't want to mislead them off the page, but you just want to try and hide the design technique. So make that a little softer there. So like this is right on that ellipse right here, and it's curving pretty much in the same direction, so you can go like this, and then you can squiggle it off like that, and it still keeps that edge and that ellipse, but it's not as obvious. And let's see, I'm checking the balance right now, from left to right. Your balance starts from the center point, the vertical center line, and it balances like a teeter-totter left to right. This is the fulcrum. Same with photos, same with anything, any visual, like cinematography. You're balancing it from left to right. So if you have too much contrast on one side, you want to try and balance it like a counterpart. So right now we're kind of balanced, but we've got a little more contrast, and I think we can add a little more interest up here. You can do some squiggles, or you can create a coincidence, like say we want a coincidence here. Just draw a line and then add a certain element in this area. We can make a coincidence on the bottom of this, and then vertical and create another circle. We'll just fill that one in, add some variety, and we'll add more circles around it. Okay, and you can control this interest with value and also colors. So red definitely grabs the viewer's attention, so always keep that in mind. So if we want the viewer's eyes to come here first, we can make sure this is red and maybe a pink, and that's going to draw their eyes around there, and everything else is like greens and blues, or you can have splashes of red around here. Definitely want to have splashes, but I'm just saying if you really want to draw their eyes here, you can have all the red there and the value. So we're getting there. This is, I'm going to erase a little bit more with the smaller one. Break this area up. And also looking at like congestion. You don't want it too congested in certain areas. Also seeing some obvious areas here. Going around the circles, making sure they don't have the straight lines sticking out of them from the construction lines. This area, I'll just break that up a little bit, and then I'm going to create some movement in this area of negative space. See how it's kind of curving around. I'm going to add some interest here. And we'll use a small pencil. Small pencil is good for those little squiggly lines or dots, little dots. This is a hierarchy. We can add that to the list as well. And we're running out of room on this list, I'm telling you. Hierarchy, color variation. We'll do color variation when we're painting, but all the variety. Definitely want to keep variety. So I'm looking at this area of negative space. I'm just adding some circles, some dots, and nice little tiny circles in these negative space areas. It's not drawing a lot of attention, but it's adding interest to that area. And when we color the painting, I'll show you how I color balance as well. Make sure there's nice color in each little section. Just a little nice area of negative space, just adding some interest there, some interest up here in the vignette, maybe some interest here. Like the edges, you can add light contrast just to add some interest here. See that? It's light, it's not high contrast. You can do that with color as well. You don't want a bright white on the edge there, it's just going to draw too much attention. That's looking pretty good. What do you think? Nice and sloppy, organized, hidden design, nice and sloppy. Imagine that in color. It's going to look real nice. To some, might look really bad to others, but I like it. Never thought I'd like doing abstract, but when I can incorporate these design techniques, it's really fun. So, let's see. This shape, can make it kind of explode outward, maybe. And it's just subtle shading, subtle colors. It's going to be like a medium gray pink or something like that. Just adding some value and interest to these areas. And this area here, can add some circles, some dots, nice little patterns, squiggly lines. This line looks a little obvious here. So since that's obvious and I can't erase it, I'm just gonna add some interest this way, just to hide that a little bit. Nice counterpart. So now let's look at the overall composition and balance. Make sure the negative space is pretty much filled in. This area's got a lot of negative space here, and then negative space here, which is balanced, but let's add some more interest. just a little bit more. There we go. All right, so I think that's good enough for this example. You get the idea. We're creating the design techniques first, keeping track of our favorite triangles with contrast, and it doesn't matter if it's obvious at first. We're going to erase the construction lines, find the balance, make sure no high contrast is around the edges, then erase the construction lines and see what we have, and then just kind of balance it back and forth from there. But let's see if we can get it closer. I don't know, I might have to scan this in so you can see closer, but so I'm on this GoPro. But that's it for this one. Stay tuned for the next one where we prepare the canvas with textures and first base layer of paint, and then the third part will be mixing paint and painting the canvas and the abstract, all freehand, all on the spot. So stay tuned. Appreciate all the comments and support, and check out the website if you want. We got a lot of articles on there, free course, partially on this YouTube, and the other books and things are on the website. But thank you so much. Take care, and I'll see you next time.